Today is the first in a series of 3 webcasts introducing you to mindfulness and self-compassion that the Brazelton Touchpoints Center is bringing you in partnership with the Center for Child and Family Wellbeing at the University of Washington and the Community of Mindful Parenting, the Charter for Compassion, and the Center for Mindful Self-Compassion. We are so grateful to these partners, to Ron Rabin, and to today's presenters, whom I will introduce in a moment, for working together with us to do what we can to bring whatever comfort and relief we can in these difficult times. As we all know, children, parents, and those of us who work with them may be stressed, afraid, worried, or overwhelmed by separations, the loss of loved ones, and the disruption of basic survival needs. Many parents are pushing themselves even harder than ever as they try to take on the role of childcare provider or teacher on top of everything else they already do. And those of us who work with children and families, we may be pushing ourselves harder than ever too, feeling obligated to do whatever is in our power to try to make things just a little bit better if we possibly can. So that's why now, more than ever, in the midst of this health and economic crisis, we just knew we had to come together with all of you so that we could all take a moment to take care of ourselves. To help us with that, in this first of our 3-part webcast series, we have with us today Chris Germer and Yafa Maritz. Yafa Maritz is the founder and director of the Community of Mindful Parenting, which offers mindful and self-compassion skills-based programs for parents with young children. She was born in Israel, where she trained as a clinical social worker. She's also a licensed mental health counselor with advanced training in infant mental health. Yafa believes that by supporting parents and creating nurturing communities for them, we can set the foundation for the positive growth of children's social, emotional, and mental health. She is a founding board member of the Charter for Compassion and has facilitated mindful self-compassion groups in diverse settings, including at the University of Washington, in high security prisons, at Seattle Children's Hospital, and Mount Elgon in Kenya, in Africa. Chris Germer is a clinical psychologist, lecturer on psychiatry at Harvard Medical School, and Chris is a co-developer with Kristen Neff of the Mindful Self-Compassion Program, which has been taught to over 100,000 people in diverse communities around the globe. Chris is author of several books on mindful self-compassion and is a founding faculty member of the Institute for Meditation and Psychotherapy, as well as of the Center for Mindfulness and Compassion. Thank you so much, Yafa. Thank you so much, Chris, for sharing your work and your wisdom with us today. Let's start with you, Chris, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself and why mindful self-compassion is the focus of what you do today.
Yeah, thank you so much for the introduction, Josh. I would like to say, though, that I'm trying to open my video, and it says that the host has to do it. So I've been sending messages, hoping that I can do that, because I can see everybody's lovely face, but I would like to.
And we want to see your face.
It's a great still photo of you, Chris. I can open my video on the left-hand corner of my screen,
right.
But you're not able to. Okay.
Whenever I hit start video, it says the host has to, it says you can't start your video because the host has stopped it.
All right. Well, Kayla will work on it.
Okay, now it may work. There we go.
There we go.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Hi, Chris. Welcome. Thank you, Kayla.
I appreciate that. It was lovely seeing on the chat bar where people are calling from all over the world, and it's such an honor to be here. And also thanks to the whole webinar team at Brazelton Touchpoints Center for hosting this series. There's been a lot of work going into it. And I'm especially delighted to be teaching with Yafa, who is a true humanitarian. She's done so much to bring self-compassion to people who need it the most, to teens, to healthcare, families, prisons. Yeah, I also like to give a shout out to my friend and colleague, Kristen Neff at the University of Texas, with whom I started the Mindful Self-Compassion training program, 8-week empirically supported training in self-compassion. And now that program really could be considered a community project because we've gotten feedback over the years from well over 1,000 teachers around the world. And it's just wonderful to be a part of this learning and teaching community. And what we'd like to share with you today is some of the things that we've learned. Right now, most everybody on this call anyway is sheltering at home, just as I am. And I just want to say, I realize that the pandemic is not affecting everybody equally, especially not people of color. And people who are risking their lives to save lives, healthcare workers, firefighters, police, truckers, delivery people, so many people. And I think one of the things that we're all learning is, or at least I hope we're all learning, is that we are one world, one interdependent world, and that we really need each other to thrive. So gratitude for everybody's contribution, and also if your contribution is staying at home, that's also key. But I do know that as the pandemic rolls on and as we are making various sacrifices because of it, that nerves are fraying, and they're especially fraying in the household with parents, as Joshua was saying, you know, having to take care of their kids, teach their kids. There's just so, every family, you know, we used to talk about the family crucible when I was learning family therapy, but every family is now in a crucible. And so, you know, the nerves are fraying. I think just about all of us need just a little extra kindness. So what Yafa and I would like to do in this webinar series, along with the whole team, is to show you how to nourish yourself in ways that you may not have considered before. Thank you so much for being here.
And now over to you, Yafa. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chris, so much. And I'm really, truly honored to be here with so many of you, taking time out of your day to kind of engage in conversation about compassion. And that kind of makes me hopeful because the situation is really very dire. And I thank you also. I just so honored to be here presenting with Chris because he's kind of embodiment of mindful self-compassion. We'll talk more about it. And Joshua, thank you so much for inviting us. Just what I will add, you did a beautiful introduction. What I'll just add that in the webinar that we will have in May 13, we'll have some of our partners in Children's Hospital talking more in depth about how we took mindful self-compassion concepts and kind of like adapted it to the population of Children's Hospital in Seattle, and even translated it to different languages like Spanish and Somali, and more coming. And later in June, we also will have people who were my partners who went with me to Kenya, to Mount Eldon, to a very remote part of Kenya, and how we adapted the mindful self-compassion in Kenya. So that's all I have to add to your introduction, and thank you so much. I think a lot of our work in providing courses about mindful self-compassion is really about practice, about embodiment of what the concepts are, rather than kind of like intellectual kind of exercise. So let's start right with it. Can we just start with an exercise? Is that okay? So we are going to, this kind of practice is a short practice, and you all will be engaged in it. And it's called, How Do I Treat a Friend? So as both Josh and Chris are talking about, this is a really dire situation right now. And most of us, all of us, you can say, all over the globe experience different levels of stress and anxiety. And we can't really connect with our friends physically, personally, like we used to. So there are a lot of communication either by phone, like now we're doing by Zoom, by different technologies. So what I would like you to do is to kind of really just, it will be a reflective exercise. So if you want to, you can just lower your gaze and kind of, because we are going to look a little bit inwardly and imagine something in our mind. So just kind of sit comfortably and lower your gaze. You can close your eyes if you want to. And what I would like you to think about is one of your dear friends, somebody who has called you recently for some support because they are going through a difficult time, like many of us. Somebody you care about is kind of struggling with something. It could be anything. It could be work situation, relationship, health, calling you and asking for your support. I just wanted to kind of really, if you don't recall something immediately, you can imagine a conversation that you had recently with somebody that you care about. And now, I hope you had something in mind, kind of listening to somebody's voice, asking you for your support, telling you about something that is really stressing them out. I wonder if you can kind of remember or think about your response to that request, to that kind of, to your friend calling you. What will be the words you will be using? What will be your tone of voice? What will be your non-verbal gestures? Even from this kind of the technology distance, how will your body kind of feel or lean toward the conversation or lean away? What will be your response? Maybe you can think of one or two phrases that you might typically say, especially when you are at your best, if you are kind of attuned and listen. What will you say? What tone of voice? Just take a minute to reflect on that and make a mental note, because we are going to switch now to a similar situation, but involving you. So think about a similar struggle that you are kind of going through right now, or maybe something different from what your friend was bringing up. Perhaps too much to juggle and you don't feel you're doing anything well. Or perhaps you're feeling isolated and alone and scared. What are your kind of struggles right now? Just kind of tell it to yourself, kind of really try to just kind of notice it in your body. Notice what you feel when you think about this struggle. What are those things that come up for you right now? There are many struggles, I'm sure, so maybe just one that kind of surfaced to the top that you would like to kind of share with yourself right now. How do you typically respond to yourself in these situations? What do you tell yourself? What words do you use? What tone of voice? How does your body feel when you talk to yourself that way? Do you notice? Just take a moment to reflect on that. And did you notice the differences in how you typically respond to a friend and how do you respond to yourself? We will ask you in a minute to kind of, just kind of like maybe write in chat, and so we can just kind of look at if you found there was any difference in the way you responded to yourself or to a friend, if there was anything any insight that you gained. But I just wanted to say, before we do that, to just kind of check in with our heart. And I grew up in Israel, as Josh was saying, and in Israel, people speak Hebrew and Arabic. And there is a greeting when two people who speak Arabic meet each other, they usually say to each other, "Kif halik." I don't know if my accent is correct, but kif halik. And I never quite understood what it is until I realized that hal means the heart. So basically what they ask each other, how is your heart doing? So I'm going to ask all of you right now to just check with your heart for a moment. How is your heart doing? Perhaps you can put your hand on your heart. And then just write on the chat box, what did you find? What insight did you gain? Thank you so much. Joshua, are you reading this? Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah. So when people are thinking about others, quiet, kindly, calm, a soft tone, active listen, better soon, reassure, everything will be better soon.
That's so beautiful. I love it.
Warm, encouraging, whispering. And then for myself, I'm less patient, I'm harsher, I judge myself, I criticize myself, I tell myself to suck it up. I'm definitely more compassionate for the other person than I am for me.
Thank you. You know, I was in a workshop titled Catch Up with an Old Friend, ... yourself. So I think here we are trying to catch up, embracing ourselves with the same love that we embrace others. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Yafa. I loved your question also. How is your heart? You know, how's your heart today? How does your heart feel? You know, it's a very compassionate question. And how often does anybody ask us this question? But also knowing we can ask ourselves that question. So in the next slide we have the informal definition of self-compassion, which comes right off what Yafa was talking about, which is really treating ourselves with the same kindness and understanding as we treat a dear friend when things go wrong. And that actually doesn't happen all that much. Relatively speaking, we're much more compassionate toward others than ourselves, according to research by Kristen Neff. But if we ever wonder, how could I be more compassionate with myself? The first thing we can ask ourselves is, how would I treat a friend right now? What would I say? What would I do? And then do it for ourselves. So in the next 5 minutes, I would like to offer you the research on self-compassion. So in the next slide, you will see a model by Kristen Neff, formal definition of self-compassion, which has 3 components. The first is self-kindness rather than self-criticism. So when things go wrong in our lives, when we suffer, we fail, we feel inadequate, we often become self-critical, but self-compassion is the opposite. It's actually self-kindness. Also, when things go wrong, we tend to isolate ourselves or feel very much alone. But one component of self-compassion is that we actually have a sense of being part of humanity, that there are other people who feel just as I do. Parenthetically, it can be a little tricky if we've been discriminated against on the basis of our identity because of race or gender, sexuality or ability. And then the key is to recognize that you're still not alone, but at least what that means is you're not alone around people who share your own identity. But everything that we feel, even shame, though it feels isolating, is actually part of the human experience. That's important to remember, and that's part of self-compassion. And finally, mindfulness. Mindfulness is kind of a loving, open, spacious awareness to be able to see what's going on in our lives in a particular moment with a kind of acceptance of the moment itself. And then on the next slide, this is the work now of Kristen, particularly pointing out that there are 2 approaches to self-compassion. Could we have the next slide, Kayla? Yeah, so this is the yin-yang model. And usually when we think of compassion, we think of the yin side or the being with side. We think about comforting, connecting, validating. But actually, is it any less compassionate for somebody to run into a burning building, to drag somebody out who would otherwise die? So there's also an acting in the world part of yang, and that is protecting, providing, and also motivating ourselves. And both have, both the yin side and the yang side have something in common, and that is care. It's about caring. Sometimes caring is fierce, sometimes caring is tender. So now what I'd like to do is to just give you a direct experience of this. If you show the next slide, Caleb. These are hand gestures. So what I'd like everyone to do is to please make a nice fist like this. And notice how that feels in your body. And the feelings that come up, you know, we feel tension, maybe anger, fear. So we often go through the day like this when we're under stress and we don't even know it, you know. But now the three components of self-compassion are, number one, it feels kind of like this. So opening your hand, noticing how it feels in your body when you do that. Dropping in, what kind of emotions arise? Yeah, so you probably feel a kind of sense of openness, sense of receptivity, maybe even warmth. So this is a gesture for mindfulness. So when a moment of self-compassion, we actually feel like this, but we also feel like this. So I'd like you to kind of put your arms out like this, as if you're holding somebody or even this planet, you know. And notice how it feels in a kind of embrace, you know. So this is a gesture of common humanity. It's a sense of being with, of sharing, of connection, maybe even love, warmth, holding, yeah? So that's also a part of self-compassion. And then the third gesture, I'd like you to take your hands and put them over your chest like this. And notice how that feels in your body when you do that. And you might feel a sense of refuge, sense of warmth, kindness, peace, ease. So this is actually how self-kindness feels. Self-kindness feels a lot like this. So these three gestures are what we call the yin of self-compassion. It feels like this, it feels like this, and it feels like this. But then there's the yang side, you know, the action in the world side. Sometimes we need to protect ourselves. Sometimes self-compassion is a lot like this. No. We can all do this at home. 1, 2, 3. No. You know, if we're in danger in some way, the best thing we can do for ourselves is to protect ourselves. No. If somebody's breaking, you know, violating your boundaries, no. Okay, so that's an important part of self-compassion. Another one is to provide, and that's yes. Let's do that together. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Yava. Yes. And finally, there's motivate. You know, sometimes people sometimes think self-compassion means that, you know, you just take the easy way out. But often the best thing we can do for ourselves is difficult thing. So we need a voice behind us that's not critical, but that's encouraging. And that might sound like, you can do like this. You can do it. Let's do that together. You can do it. You can do it. Or, you know, you can think of, you know, I believe in you. I trust you. I've got your back. You can do it. Or as Raphael and his coach say before they go out on the, Raphael Nadal and his coach before they go out on the tennis court. Vamos! Let's do it. Vamos! So that's the sense of motivation. Okay. So next slide, please. So many people. So I'm kind of breaking my word. I said I only do this for 5 minutes. I've been going on a little bit longer, but I'm going to just give you the highlights here. Okay. So for many people, the word self-compassion has kind of a cringe factor. People worry, oh, it's going to make me weak, selfish, self-indulgent, demotivated, or full of self-pity. And what the research shows is actually the opposite. People who are high in self-compassion, they actually have more perspective on their problems and they ruminate less. People who are self-compassionate, they have a lot of resilience. The research on self-compassion, like 3,000 articles now, basically in one word, they show emotional resilience, coping, the ability to bounce back, which is easy to imagine because if you feel loved and supported from the inside, we have so much more courage and willingness to make mistakes and try again. So we found actually that self-compassion is the opposite of weakness. It's strength and resilience. Selfishness, actually the opposite is so. We find that people who are high in self-compassion are actually more compassionate toward others. And in relationships, they're less aggressive, they're more collaborative, so forth. So if you're, on the dating market and you want to have a good partner, go out once and then you should give them the Kristen Neff self-compassion scale, see what their score is and decide if you want to see them again. You save yourself a lot of trouble. Self-indulgent, some people think, oh, I just sit around and, watch TV and eat bonbons if I'm self-compassionate. Actually, people who are self-compassionate, they take care of themselves better. They eat more moderately, they drink less alcohol, they practice safe sex, they exercise more. And also motivation. Actually, people high in self-compassion are more motivated, not less, because inside they have a voice that's saying, you can do it. I trust you, I believe in you. That kind of coach rather than somebody criticizing us, which is demotivating. So self-compassion is good for you. Can I have the next slide, please? Yeah, so there are so many articles. This, I think, was 2018, but now in the literature, there are at least 3,000 articles, and just across the board, they show that self-compassion is a strength. Can I have the next slide? And in particular, this is just summarizing the research, that it increases well-being, happiness, life satisfaction, coping, resilience, emotional intelligence, also wisdom, creativity. Actually, somebody once said that the research on self-compassion is now boring because it's associated with just about every measure of healthy emotional functioning. So it's a key factor in emotional well-being. So if we can cultivate self-compassion, it branches out into so many aspects of our lives. Decreases in anxiety, depression, stress, improved physical health, more satisfying relationships. And then last slide, next slide, is the question, can it be learned? Some people say, well, I had a tough childhood and I didn't, I grew up with a lot of shame. I don't have a lot of self-compassion, but actually anybody can learn self-compassion and in so many different ways. We know, for example, that if you have a dog, if you get a dog, it will increase your self-compassion. Now, I imagine that's also the case for cats, but they haven't done cat research on this yet. If you practice yoga, if you go to therapy, if you're compassionate to others, you actually become more compassionate to yourself. You kind of find yourself more deserving. And then there are training programs in compassion, such as the Mindful Self-Compassion Program, and also mindfulness training, mindfulness-based stress reduction, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. They all increase self-compassion. Self-compassion appears to be an underlying factor in emotional well-being, and we can also teach it. So there you have it. Thanks. Jaffa?
Thank you so much. So let's again go to practice, and we are going to, this is called self-compassion break. When we teach mindful self-compassion, we have formal practices and then informal one. This falls into informal one, which means you can do it anytime during the day. It can be very short once you kind of know the routine. And it requires really just kind of really paying attention to how you're feeling right now. So it requires stopping what we are doing, taking a pause, and just kind of pay attention. So let's kind of, and we already did the thinking about stressful situation when we talked about how we talk to ourselves and a friend. We are going to kind of really bring up a stressful situation right now to do this exercise so we can really embody some of the stress. So again, let's take a pause. Just kind of lower your gaze. And just kind of take a minute to reflect how the COVID-19, this coronavirus, had impacted your life. What area in particular became more stressful for you? What are you worried about? Could be your health, a beloved one health, or could be about work or financial situation, your kids, your parents. You can use the same situation that you thought about when we did the exercise before. And I would like to suggest that, because this is the first time we do this exercise and it's a very short exercise right now here, just to take the range should be from mild to moderate, not something that is too overwhelming. So stay within a range of mild and moderate, but still something that you can still embody, that you can still feel some stress in your body when you think about it. So I'll give you just a moment to really bring up a situation that causes you stress right now. Just one situation, something that surfaces to the top. And notice if you can feel this emotional discomfort in your body, this kind of stress in your body. Just kind of see if you can make space for it right now. Just accept it, just make space for this stress right now in your body. And notice, where do you feel it most? Is there any particular part of your body where you feel the stress more? I usually feel it in my tummy, and I feel kind of like, before I started today, I felt these butterflies and contractions in my tummy. So where do you feel it most? Noticing that is a mindfulness moment. And Chris, so beautifully in the gestures, we said there is 3 parts of mindful self-compassion, starting with mindfulness. So just paying attention right now to where is a stress, what is a stress, how does it kind of really exhibit in your body? This is a moment of mindfulness. Just noticing. And you can just kind of really just notice it by acknowledging it. You can say, yes, this is really stressful. Or you can say, it hurts. Or it's scary. Or it's painful. Whatever comes to mind, acknowledging kindly the stress in your body that you feel right now. And can you envision that what you are feeling right now may be experienced by all people all over the globe? As we say, this is kind of a global crisis that we are living through right now. This part addresses the common humanity component of mindful self-compassion. So we addressed mindfulness by just noticing and acknowledging. And now we are kind of thinking this kind of like this big hug thing that Chris was doing. This is kind of, a lot of people feel that way right now. This is common humanity. And perhaps you can say to yourself as you acknowledge this, other people may feel the same way too. I'm not alone. We all struggle right now. Whatever works for you, whatever words kind of really seem authentic to you as you acknowledge that you are not alone feeling that stressful situation right now, or a stressful situation, not exactly the same one perhaps, but everybody is going through a very difficult time right now in various degrees. And now put your hands over your heart or any other place that can soothe you. Feel the warmth of your hand and the gentle touch. And just say to yourself, may I be kind to myself. This 3rd component is being kind to yourself. It's kindness, loving kindness. So find a soothing posture, something that maybe you can rub your hands against each other, or put your hands on your cheek, or put your hand on your heart. And just kind of feel the warmth and gentleness flows from your hand into your body. As you say to yourself, may I be kind to myself this moment. Maybe we can ask ourselves, what do I need to hear right now that expresses kindness to myself? What do I need a very good friend, let's say, to tell me right now that expresses kindness to myself as I'm struggling right now? some phrases that will speak to us at this situation and comfort us. And I'll give you some suggestions. Something like, perhaps we can tell ourselves, may I be kind to myself. May I give myself all the compassion that I need. May I learn to accept myself as I am at this moment. May I be patient with the way things unfold. Or maybe may I be strong. May I live in love. Or maybe something else that comes to your mind that you need to hear right now, that helps comfort and soothe you, that kind of really brings kindness to yourself. And since we know that this is a global crisis, as we said, and a lot of people are suffering right now, a lot of people are going through difficult time, maybe we can just end by kind of really sharing those kind of sentences, these kind of phrases with everybody. And we can say something like, may we all give ourselves the compassion that we need. May we all learn to accept ourselves as we are at this moment. May we all be patient with the way things unfold. May we all be strong. May we all live in love. And say it as if you really mean it. Say it as if your life and other people's life depends on it. This practice can be used any time of day and night. And it will help you remember to evoke the three aspects of self-compassion when you need it most. Perhaps we can use a chat room to just kind of like really talk about this experience after you kind of really check in with your heart again. How is your heart doing? Kif halik. Just kind of what was this? This was a really short, and we did it a bit shorter because of sake of time. But you can chat and use a chat to kind of express if you were feeling any shift as you are going through these three parts of self-compassion break. And maybe that will be a tool that you can use from now on for the rest of your life. Okay, thank you. Joshua, do you want to say a couple of things from the chat, or shall I move on?
There are so many common worries: work, parents, family's health, the children I work with, trying to work at home while taking care of my family, trying to keep my family safe and healthy, not being able to attend church, and then feeling it in my head, chest, neck, back, shoulder, stomach, lower back, whole body. We have to learn to give ourselves permission to have compassion for ourselves as we do others. I am so grateful to be here. May I be more compassionate to myself. I love this webinar.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that people will just kind of continue to do it. And all it really takes is just a few minutes of just kind of stopping, pausing, and just kind of taking a self-compassion break and then proceeding. So that's wonderful. I think that now I will speak very briefly about the connection between the work we are doing with children and mindful self-compassion. Is that okay? Yeah. So as I said earlier, I was always interested in what cultivates a healthy attachment and healthy bonding between parents and their babies. I kind of focus a lot of working with early childhood. And if I can sum up all these years and years of research, I can sum it up in 3 words, which is loving, connecting, presence, which is also another way that we describe mindful self-compassion, right, Chris? Loving, connecting, presence. I was listening just yesterday to our former Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy. I don't know if you all are aware. He came up with a new book called Together. And I loved what he said, because he said after all these years of being a leader in the field and a doctor, The most powerful medicine we can give is love. And the vehicle to provide this medicine is relationship. The most powerful medicine we can give is love. And the vehicle to provide it is relationship. So it is through relationship that we thrive. He also said in the interview that, and there are many interviews with him now, you can find out, that the best gift we can give another human being is a gift of our full attention and deep listening. So when we give this full attention and deep listening to another person, they feel felt, they feel appreciated, they feel loved. So this is a foundation of emotional and physical health, according to him. And I think this kind of like this webinar, not only these 3 parts, but the whole series of webinars that Joshua is doing here, that Brazelton Point is doing, is called something like listening or learning to listen, right? So it's all about listening. So I just love it. And so this kind of relationship is between, that I was interested is very much is between the parents and the child and how they can be fully attentive. So that, but also is right now, as you understand, is also how we can make it U-turn and have this kind of relationship with ourselves. Dan Siegel, who is a well-respected authority on attachment, says that we need 3 S's to lead to a secure attachment, which is a 4S. So the first S is safe. The child needs to feel safe in order to build the foundation for secure attachment. And that's, we talked about it when we described the compassion. So in order to be safe, the child needs to live in a consistent, reliable environment that is protective and predictable and responsive. So that's how the child grows to feel safe. The child needs to be soothed. That's the second S. So safe and soothed. The second S is soothed, which is touch. So the child needs to have loving, warm touch. And this loving, warm touch that we talked about ourselves, kind of touching ourselves, but loving, warm touch that releases this oxytocin, which is called the love hormone. It's a relationship hormone. So the child needs to be soothed, the child needs to feel safe, and the child needs to feel seen, to be seen by another. My husband is from South Africa, and when we go to South Africa, when we used to go, and we go to sometimes to, we meet people from the Zulu nation, they have a really wonderful way they greet each other. And I don't know if I'll do justice to the accent, but they basically, when they see each other, they say in Zulu, sawubona, sawubona, which means, I see you. And the answer is, enkohona, which means, I'm here. So sawubona, enkohona. Thank you for putting it up. And by saying, I'm seeing you and I bring you, I feel that you brought me into existence. So by seeing me, I exist. And this is so beautiful. And that's kind of like, I think, what we are talking about when the child needs to be seen by his parent. But this all, you know, the good news is that if we grow up to become adult and we didn't grow in optimal environment for secure attachment, the beautiful research that we have now is showing us that we can earn security by using basically the same principles that we do with a child, with ourselves. And you saw it today, like by turning to ourselves with the same love and kindness, the same kind of like attention, and the same listening in a kind way, not critical, but kind of like really in a kind of containing ourselves in this kind of like loving and compassionate environment, we can grow, we can earn security too. So we can offer ourselves, as I said here, that what every human being longs for, which is full attention, full listening, compassionate listening, laced by loving kindness and compassion. So that's it.
Thank you, Yafa. I love all those inspiring words, and I'm also going to get Vivek Murthy's book together that you had recommended. Thank you for that. And I just so appreciate that, you know, what we all seek is, you know, deep listening and full attention. That said, because of what we're all going through and people having more stress than usual, probably a lot of people on this call are thinking, oh boy, that's the last thing I'm able to give right now. I'm just trying to give myself a little attention. So, so what I'd like to do is to lead you in a practice. This is called Giving and Receiving Compassion Practice. It's actually a meditation, but you can do it in the heat of the battle, you know, when in the middle of some sort of, you know, family drama. And this meditation is also, some people call it Breathing in and out compassion. Some people call it caring for others without losing yourself. But it's really quite simple, and it's elegant insofar as when we breathe in and we breathe out. And when we breathe in, we're allowing the in-breath to be for us and the out-breath to be for another person. So in this way, what typically happens in caregiving situations is we completely forget about ourselves, and that's actually the beginning of compassion fatigue, and also anger, because we have to make boundaries. But one way of staying connected but not losing yourself is to remember that every in-breath is for you and every out-breath for the other person. So I'd like to lead you in this little practice that maybe, let's see, how much time do I have here? Yeah, a little bit of time, 5 to 10 minutes. What I'd like you to do, if you're willing, to find a comfortable position and to close your eyes. And see if you can notice the simple physical sensation of breathing. In particular, the sensation of breathing in and the sensation of breathing out. Now focusing for a little while on just the in-breath and seeing if you can feel how the in-breath energizes the body. Every time we breathe in, there's actually a slight increase in energy in the body. See if you can feel that. And it's not a crime to breathe in for ourselves. You know, actually, when you were born, everybody around was thrilled when you breathed in for yourself. And everybody you're caring for, they want you to breathe in for yourself, right? So allowing yourself to breathe in one breath after another. And as you do that, you can even breathe in a quality that you need right now. Like maybe you need some strength. Maybe you need some warmth, maybe you need some tenderness, maybe you need some peace, ease. So just feel every in-breath, and with every in-breath, breathe in something that you need right now. Or maybe it's just a smile or a quality of warmth or light. One in-breath after another, the in-breath for you, and also breathing in what you need. Knowing the in-breath is always for you. And it happens quite on its own. And now releasing the in-breath and just beginning to feel what it's like to breathe out one breath after another. The sensation of exhalation. And you'll probably notice the body relaxes with every out-breath. It's actually parasympathetic. It's the relaxation response with every exhalation. So that too is good. We need to be energized. We need to be relaxed. And now what I'd like you to do is to bring to mind a person who you love or someone who you care about who might be struggling. Or maybe even a whole group of people or the whole planet. And what I'd like you to do is to just breathe out this quality of ease and relaxation and well-being to that person. So visualize somebody in your mind's eye or a group of people. And just feel your breath and let every out-breath, one after another, be for this other being. So this is out for you. Breathing very naturally in and out, but letting the out breath be for another person. And as you do this, perhaps offering something good, maybe some love, a smile, some light, some ease, some well-being. Okay, and now we're going to bring it all together. So what I'd like you to do, again, is to feel your body both breathing in and breathing out. Just the natural flow of your breath. And I would like you, just like a pendulum that goes back and forth in a clock, back and forth. Or just the same way that an ocean flows in and an ocean flows out. Waves draw in and waves draw out. I would like you to allow every in-breath to be for you, breathing in for yourself and out for another. In a very simple way, don't try too hard. Just feel the rhythm of your breathing. Feeling the rhythm of your breathing, even allowing yourself to be gently rocked by the rhythm of your breathing. Breathing in for me and out for you. Just like waves in the ocean, an ocean of compassion. Compassion in, compassion out. Goodness in, goodness out. Bathing in some quality which nourishes you and others, and feeling it with the in-breath and giving it with the out-breath. And last step, I'd like you to ask yourself, what do I need right now? What would be a really good balance for me? Many people are talking about balancing their lives right now. Maybe their lives are a little out of balance. What would be the right breath balance for you? Maybe breathing in 10 times for me and 1 for you is the perfect balance right now, because you just need it, and it's not a crime and it's not selfish. Everyone needs you to take care of yourself. So finding the right balance, 1 for me, 1 for you, 5 for me, 1 for you, 100 for me, 1 for you, or the reverse. What's the balance that you need? And then having the courage to give that to yourself right now. Breathing in as much as you need, and then breathing out when it feels just right. Okay, and now beginning to release the practice. Knowing you could bring your attention back to your breath anytime you need to be internally rocked and caressed by your breathing. Anytime you need to remember that you too exist and you're in the room and that you too are deserving of love, letting the in-breath be for you as much as you need and letting the out-breath be for another. And you can do this in meditation, you can do this in the heat of the battle. Anytime you need, let the in-breath be yours. Thank you for doing that. Thank you. So Josh, we may have a few minutes. What do you think? maybe a minute or two, I don't know.
I would just quickly share some of the many, many comments in the chat. I put stress aside. This exercise brought tears. I love it. I've been holding back these tears for a long time. Thank you, Yafa. I feel more calm, and I was able to give myself some time to calm down and breathe, soften my heart and breath. May we all create a safe space for grace for ourselves. Wow, I feel a relief. I need to think of myself too. I am going to share this with my staff and parents. I told myself I love you. A sense of warmth and peace surrounded me. Thank you. I needed that. This webinar has given me awareness of self-care for the day. I also learned that I need to take care of myself, because if I am not okay, I won't be able to help others. Having compassion for ourselves is one of the best strategies to de-stress, knowing that we are entitled to a few moments of peace. I am reminded that I cannot teach what I do not know, and I know I often don't practice self-compassion. These exercises are wonderful, taking time for myself so I can recharge and be better to everyone else. The world needs more people like your team this time, and all the world needs compassion for self. This world needs more people like all of you who have joined us today. So Yafa, I think you have a very short hug poem to end with before we say goodbye. You're on mute, Yafa. There you go.
Still on mute. There you go.
Okay, good. I just kind of was so touched by all the messages on chat. It's just beautiful, and people actually seem like you're able to experience, even if it was so short, and you know. So the poem that I don't know the author, but it's all of us, it seems. Invisible hugs, it's called. Invisible hugs. This is a time of invisible hugs, of the hold on tight despite. It's now, in the world of distance, that we can work at the invention of remaining together. In the world of distance, that we can work on the invention of remaining together. Invisible hugs. Invisible hugs to all of you.
Virtual hug. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much. Before we say goodbye, I'm going to ask everybody, there's several thousand of you, to unmute yourselves. So if you can do that, you can hear your voices. And if you're not able to, if you could just put one word into the chat so that you can leave each other with one word that says
our gift.
what you are feeling now, although you've been leaving lots of wonderful words all the way through. So unmute yourself to say goodbye. If we can hear each other say a greeting of goodbye to each other, or one word in the chat. Kayla, I think you said you might be able to unmute everybody, but I don't know if that's a technical feat we can accomplish. And I want to thank you, Yafa Maritz, Chris Germer, for such a spectacular time, which has brought so much comfort and relief to everybody who's joined today, so many of whom I think are feeling more peace as they go back to the very hard work before them. I also want to thank Ron Rabin, who has been instrumental in bringing us all together and producing this, into our team at the Brazelton Touchpoints Center, Ashley Gaddis, Kaylee Savelli, and Autumn Strasbow. And I want to thank you, Barry Brazelton, for showing us the healing power of listening to babies. I hope you'll join us all again for our next session on mindfulness and self-compassion. In the second webinar, we'll explore how communities can create culturally relevant, trauma-informed mindfulness and self-compassion programs. We'll have representatives from a team of parent leaders and healthcare partners in Seattle, Washington, and they'll share their experience developing community-led mindfulness and self-compassion practices to promote the well-being of youth, families, and communities who are marginalized. Together, they've worked to build resilience and collective capacity for social justice and healing, and we're eager to learn from them. And our third webinar on mindfulness and self-compassion will be on Wednesday, June 24th. I also want to remind you to come back again next Wednesday at the same time, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, 12 noon Pacific Time, when we will have our second webcast with our friends at Sesame Street, where you will see resources from Sesame Street for children and families focused on offering comfort for families now. And then on June 3rd, again, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, 12 noon Pacific Time, we will be joining Chris Perry, Deputy Secretary of California Health and Human Services, for a conversation about marriage equality and same-sex parenting, families on the front lines. Thank you so much, everybody who's participated, for all you do, and we look forward to seeing you again.